Um, Thank you so much for being here for this exciting and important event. I'm Chip Gross. I'm a member of the Redefined Ed board, and it's my honor to welcome you all to the fourth installment of our speaker series, A City Changing. To date, the series has been attended by more than 500 of Atlanta's community and civic leaders, including all of you. We are fortunate to live in a dynamic city, and we are here this evening because we do not take that dynamism for granted. We know that there is a relationship between the city's health and prosperity and the extent to which a city educates and cares for its young people. For growth to be sustainable, for change to be inclusive, a city needs excellent public schools, which I'm sure everybody here definitely agrees with. In addition to that point, excellent public schools require excellent teachers and ones who understand the self-sacrifice required to drive impact. Teaching, which in conversation with Nikki Giovanni, James Baldwin called a revolutionary act, and what all of us in this room understand truly as an act of love and self-sacrifice. All of which gets us to tonight's conversation about teacher talent development and retention. This event is timely. 5 years now after the pandemic began, we still feel its effect, and I'm sure a number of us here can definitely vouch for that and the experiences that they have. The more that we can support teachers, the more they can support our students. And our panelists tonight bring decades of combined experience and both local and national viewpoints on ways that we can better serve our students. Together, we're going to review data, best practices to retain strong teachers, and examine how local schools are implementing these policies to keep the most impactful teachers in the classroom where we desperately need them. We hope that you leave tonight inspired, and with that, I'm now proud to introduce the Executive Director of Redefined Ed Atlanta, my good friend, Angira Scusi, who will give you more context on this evening's important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. And thank you all for being here and joining us today for this really important conversation that's about our city's present and our future. So as I look around the room today, I'm seeing a lot of people. I'm seeing district and school leaders and partners. I'm seeing elected officials. I'm seeing funders. I'm seeing parent leaders. I'm seeing advocates and nonprofit partners. And I am so grateful for each and every one of you being here today. I think that we know that this work is important, but together in partnership and with commitment for moving forward. So thank you for that. So we're here today because we know that research makes clear that the most important thing in class that can make a difference for students is teachers. We know great teachers are by far the most important thing. But we also know that if teachers come and go as if they're walking in a revolving door, then student progress is really limited, and it can only happen in fits and starts, if at all. So we know that making sustained student growth requires recruiting, developing, and retaining great teachers. Or, in the words of the national nonprofit TNTP, who you'll be hearing from later today, recruiting and retaining great teachers can change the trajectory of student lives. And we know we have some work to do. So this past spring, educators from over 20 public schools across Metro Atlanta took part in the TNTP Insight Survey. And the results from that survey are really important to our understanding of school climate and instructional culture. You will hear more about these results today and how we are using this feedback from educators to drive improvements. This topic is complex, and I really view tonight's conversation as more of a kickoff than a culmination. I believe that progress is possible, but it's going to require all of us coming together. We're going to have to do the hard work and to put our children first so that we can ensure that we are giving them the best possible chance at success. I am so grateful that you are here alongside us today to move this critical work forward. Before we proceed, let's just talk about a few quick housekeeping items. I know that's your favorite. All right, so let's please all silence our cell phones if you haven't done so already. And let's keep our table conversations to a low volume so we can hear what's going on up here. We're going to reserve the last 10 minutes of our evening this evening for panel, for Q&A from the audience. So you will see on your table little note cards. Please use those note cards to write down any questions that you have for panelists. And there is a Redefine Ed staff member at every one of your tables. They will collect those from you, and we will make sure to bring them for that last 10-minute Q&A. And lastly, my ask of you all is, let's all keep an open mind. We know that getting different results is going to require us to do things differently. I hope you will join me in being game to hearing alternative approaches to how we can achieve better outcomes on these key issues. And now I'm really excited to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, Redefine Ed's very own Emily Castillo-Leon. Emily is an experienced educator. She served as a teacher, an instructional coach, a school founder, and a school leader. Emily is deeply familiar with the challenges and opportunities around teacher retention. Please join me in welcoming Emily.
Thanks so much, Gira. I am so grateful to be here tonight with you all to talk about what is really at the heart of my work and my life. Before joining Redefine Ed, I founded Ethos Classical, a K-8 school in Southwest Atlanta. And Ethos was really born out of the pursuit of equity for students, true equity, not just academically, but for the whole child. At Ethos, equity meant we wanted to create a school where students were seen, known, celebrated, and where rigor and joy lived hand in hand together. As a school leader, I got to see firsthand the impact that trajectory-changing teachers had on students every day, from the expectations that they held, to the decisions that they made, to the experiences that they created. Their impact cannot be understated on what it means for children's lives. And now, as a mom of 3 little boys, Mateo, Lucas, and Julio, I feel the urgency of making sure that every single teacher across Atlanta is worthy of our students. I know what it means to trust other people with your children every day, and there is no greater trust that we have than the teachers that our students are with each day. And it's that urgency that really grounds my work as the Vice President of Schools and Talent with Redefine Ed Atlanta. My role and my passion is to ensure that every child across our city have teachers who believe in their power and potential and are committed to unlocking that every single day. Atlanta is a city that loves and believes in our children and invests in bold ideas. And we must come together around this critical question of how do we make sure that the very best teachers are in front of our students daily. Tonight, our panel is going to dig into both the challenges and the extraordinary opportunities in front of us. Too often, these conversations are a binary. Should we focus on children succeeding, or should we focus on teachers sustaining and being happy? I want to challenge us to reject that. The truth is that these two things work hand in hand. Children thrive academically when the very best teachers are in their classrooms year over year over year. Our task tonight is to imagine the systems and structures and supports that must be true for that to happen. So get excited. We're going to dig in together. And I want to introduce some folks who are going to ground us both in the context and the data of when we talk about teacher retention and development, what we really mean and what matters most. By way of introduction, Michael Franco is the Vice President of National Consulting for the New Teacher Project, also known as TNTP. As Vice President of National Consulting, Michael leads the development and delivery of TNTP's field-leading products and service models and supports national partnerships to expand opportunities for young people. So, yay, Michael. We will also hear from Dr. Rebecca Parshall, who serves as the Director of Strategy and Development at Learn for Life, where she leads cross-sector coalitions to identify and scale strategies that drive equitable outcomes for historically underserved students in early literacy, middle grades math, and post-secondary success. All right, off to you all.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be with you. And I see a few friends who came to our literacy meeting earlier today to dive into literacy. So a few things. Let me make sure I understand the clicker. Yep, okay. I serve at a nonprofit called Learn for Life, and our theory of change is to bring folks together to look at data, to understand what's working in the region, where we need to direct resources so that we can scale those impactful strategies, we call them bright spots, to more students across the region. However, tonight, I have been tasked to just give you some sobering data. So I'm not going to get into solutions. The folks who come after me will talk about what's working. I'm just going to give us the clear-eyed picture of here's where the region stands and why this conversation is so critical. All right, so when I talk about the region, I know we've been saying city, I say region. How many folks in the room live in City of Atlanta? You pay City of Atlanta taxes. All right, and then how many folks live in Metro Atlanta? It's more than half the room, but we all call ourselves Atlantans, right? And so the data I'm going to share with you tonight is Metro Atlanta data. For us, this means 8 school districts in the 5-county region. And here's who those school districts serve. Across the region, 80% are students of color in our public schools in these 8 districts. 59% are low income. And 18% of our students are English language learners. Another data point that's not on the slide because I just pulled this, 20% of our region's K-12 students are currently chronically absent from school. 20%. And that's defined as missing at least 10% of the current school days. So chronic absenteeism is a big challenge for educators. I'm sure it is contributing to the burnout and overwhelm that our teachers are feeling. Our region represents almost 600,000 K-12 students. It's about a third of the students in the state of Georgia. So just grounding you in some of that foundational data for where we sit. Here's how that 8 school district region is doing in Metro Atlanta. At Learn for Life, we measure 6 key indicators. We call it the cradle to career continuum because we know just looking at one data point will not tell us the whole story, right? If we just look at high school graduation rates, and celebrate those, they are not a marker of mastery of content. They are just a marker of you passed your classes. It's a marker of completion. And so if you just look at high school graduation, you will get a false sense of positivity around how our region's kids are doing. Because what we know is we're really struggling in these key indicators around 3rd grade reading and 8th grade math, which are indicative of success in all the other metrics, right? We know that 9th grade algebra, which we set up for success in 8th grade algebra, in 8th grade math, 9th grade algebra is most predictive of whether you graduate high school, whether you go to college, what your lifetime earnings are. And we also know on the early end of the spectrum, early literacy is critical. It is the foundation. So by the end of 3rd grade, teachers should be transitioning from teaching kids how to read to in 4th grade, we're now using reading to learn. Right? So there's less direct instruction around how to read. So that's why these measures really matter. We cannot just look at the aggregate scores for how we're doing in these key indicators. And also, if you look at post-secondary, we define post-secondary as anything after high school. So certificate, credential, 2-year, 4-year. Most of our high school graduates are enrolling and then many are not completing. So they're sold, in a sense, a bill of goods in terms of what their high school diploma means. They don't have the support, both the financial aid support and the academic preparation to be successful in post-secondary. That's also, for those of you who represent our, industry or business in the room, we're not meeting the workforce needs or the economic needs of our region when only 26% are completing their post-secondary. All right. The aggregate only tells part of the story. So we're going to break this down into what does this look like at a disaggregated level. I'm not going to give you cuts for all of them because they're very similar. So right now we're just looking at 3rd grade reading. And if you can't see on the screen, it really actually doesn't matter because what we know is that there are 40 and 50 point gaps across subgroups. So Black and Hispanic students are 50 points lower on 3rd grade reading than white and Asian students. This is unconscionable. We cannot say we're a region who cares about our kids and cares about our public education systems with these large gaps. Same is true for economically disadvantaged students versus wealthier students. Same is true for English language learners. Large gaps, we see this in any data that we pull across the region. That's a disaggregated cut. To answer a question around, well, how has it looked kind of pre and post-pandemic? So here's 8th grade math. In the years leading up to the pandemic, so 2016 to 2019, we had this tiny uptick, like on average, right? But this is, I chose this because this is indicative of a lot of our scores that we've hovered around the same levels for many years. 2020 was not a tested year, and then we came back, we lost a lot of ground in 8th grade math. And 8th grade math over the last 2 years is actually our best news story. It's been growing, right? So we gained 7 points as a region last year in math, and we've been making up ground. So there's a lot of good things happening in math, but we're still only serving half of our kids. All right, this all leads to why we're here tonight, which is to talk about why teachers matter, because they are the greatest in-school predictor for student achievement, meaning we know that poverty is actually the greatest cause for these academic achievement gaps in our country. What can schools control? Not always poverty. They can control what happens within their buildings, and teachers matter. How many current or former classroom teachers in the room? Almost every, wow, a lot of folks, great. Myself as well, I started as a high school teacher in South Los Angeles, and that's informed kind of how I see the world and all of the work that I do. Okay, so we're going to ask, how are teachers doing? In 2 areas. Emily mentioned also teacher development, and that is a critical area. I'm not going to share data on teacher development, but really on the recruitment and pipeline side and on the working conditions for teachers. Again, this is the sobering data before we get into the strategies that are working around development. Okay, so on this first piece, I pulled data yesterday. I went to the 8 district websites to find out how many certified teacher roles are still vacant. They're still trying to hire right now in this school year. So there's 158 vacancies across our 8 districts. There's a district that has 0 vacancies, and then the highest has 44 current vacancies. And if you represent one of these districts, you can find yourself somewhere in between it. My district leaders probably know exactly what your number is as of today. I know Alicia will talk about where her number is from Clayton. So that's where we are. There's also uneven levels of like where those vacancies are distributed, right? It's not all equal. So we see the highest needs in special education. That's always been the case. This isn't just post-pandemic. Math, science, foreign languages, English as a second language, and then especially in high poverty districts, and also very rural districts, which is not our metro. Okay, here's the pipeline for teachers entering the profession. In the last decade, College of Education students have decreased by 1/3, so fewer entering credentialing programs. And the number of newly licensed teachers across the country fell by 50% over the last decade. So we are not developing enough teachers. The pipeline is not there. We all know that teachers make less money than other college-educated adults. It's about 1/4 less. And so there is difficulty in attracting students, especially if you are a first-generation college student trying to lift your family's economic status. It is a difficult sell to say, please go into teaching. We also know that representation in teaching matters. And so the metro is actually a lot closer. I was able to pull state data that shows we have a gap between the number of Black teachers in the state and the percent of Black students in the state, and there is a gap. We know that the metro is a lot closer to this number. So kudos to our districts for getting this close, and you can ask your district exactly where they are in representation, but this really matters that students see themselves represented, understand their own experiences and their teachers, and see teachers as professionals. All right, working conditions. Again, this is the sobering data. Okay, this is a national RAND study that's conducted every year. The number stays about the same. Frequent job-related stress experienced by teachers and school principals is about twice as high as the average working adult in this country. Just pausing because I see a lot of people taking photos. This is very sobering. So that's frequent job-related stress for educators. And now this comes from a Professional Association of Georgia Educators. This is page data, so this is statewide data. Found that nearly half of Georgia's teachers want to leave the profession within the next 5 years. This number is also, we check this every year, and it's kind of hovered right around this number over time. I will say this is a point-in-time perception survey. So what that means is we don't see half of the workforce leaving, but what we can read through this data is that half of the workforce is so discontented that if they have a good option, they want to leave. And that in and of itself should be sobering and motivating for us, right? That teachers don't feel good about being in the classroom. That's not good for kids. All right, on this same page survey, so this is Georgia, we see that the number one reason that teachers indicate they want to leave the classroom is burnout. And the folks on the panel will do a really good job of like breaking down what that looks like in practice and what we can do to support teacher burnout. These don't add up to 100 because they ranked their top 2 reasons. So burnout is the number one. However, and this is also Georgia data, we see that teachers, this is like my only positive slide, it's also my last one, so we're making a corner here. Teachers who say they have supportive school leadership experience significantly lower levels of burnout than teachers who say my administrators are not supportive. And so there is like a large component, and you'll hear about this from folks speaking, about the importance of school leadership in setting the culture, districts, and creating the conditions that are necessary for teachers to feel successful for the thing that they signed up for because they love kids and they want to do well. That's a little bit of regional data. I'm now going to hand it to Michael to talk to us about what's working on a national level.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Michael Franco. I am the Vice President of National Consulting at TNTP. I know a lot of you are familiar with the organization, but one of the really wonderful and impactful things about TNTP is we truly work nationally among all the states that you see, nearly 6,000 districts across the country, which means we have access to a lot of data about the teacher and the student experience that informs our practice and informs our research. I'm very excited to be here in Atlanta today to provide some of that national perspective and to kind of kick off a conversation that really is anchored in a research story that is far longer than the 10 minutes that I have with you today, but is hundreds of pages that you can check out for yourself. Actually, I come to you today both as a national researcher, a practitioner, background in education, in terms of leadership, but also as a teacher. Now, I wasn't going to tell this story, but you ended with the burnout slide, and it was very resonant because like a lot of folks here, I was a teacher many, many years ago. As a high school 9th grade and 10th grade teacher, I taught in a small border town in South Texas about an hour and a half where my grandparents grew up. And I have of driving to that school, and you're not very good at it. You're 22 or 23. It was completely dark, and it's a rural community, and I'm the first one at school. It's like the second week of September, so things are not going really great, and you're a little bit exhausted, and you're tired, and I would show up, and I would pull up my truck, and we'd look lines of this long hallway. My room was everything is dark, except for this one light bulb that stays on all night in front of my classroom. And it was like something out of like a Stanley Kubrick film, right? Take care of these 163 kids. I remember not being very good at it and remember thinking like, I have a flash drive of the goodwill of a second and third year teacher across the hallway who are helping me out. I have a assistant principal who generally has my back. And I remember, seriously, I could not get out of the car. And I remember telling myself, seriously, I could not get out of the car. And I remember telling myself every day for like 3 weeks. And I always got out of the truck. And there's teachers all over the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. It worked out really well. We had great results. build experience in that community. But hope is not when it comes to teacher support. And all too often, we have teachers all over the country sitting in those parking lots, a lot of times when it's dark out, and they are armed with hope, and we have a classroom for 10 years, 15 years to be those excellent teachers. The data that I'm talking about, I hope, offers some of that pathway. So that's where my story started. I also started as a district leader at a mid-sized district when we were struggling with teacher retention. And that's when this TNTP report called The Irreplaceables landed on my desk. It's about a decade old. You might be saying, Michael, why are we talking about research that is a decade old? Because a lot of it is still true. And so the work that we were doing here in Atlanta was that we started with teacher retention and teacher effectiveness. And what we found in our teachers, retaining our best teachers. When we look at our best teachers, we like to name things. We call them the irreplaceables because effectively that's what they were. 20% of our teaching force that we studied, and we studied it across 900 schools in this one site, using a series of data points that we still use today to inform the insight data that is used in Atlanta and all across the country. What we found is that this top 20% of school teachers were responsible for 5 to 6 more months of learning for their students than the teachers on the other end of the spectrum. Unfortunately, those teachers were also leaving at the same rate as all the other teachers in the district. All the teacher retention data that Rebecca just applies to our best teachers also that are making the most impact. When nationally, that also means, but it's also in the data, 50% of those teachers will be out of the classroom in 5 years. That is not just devastating for the students that are in those classrooms, it's devastating for the continuity in the students who need them the most. When we look at schools with the most challenging conditions, who have the students who need the most learning acceleration, it's going to take you 10 to 11 hires or 10 to 11 candidates to find another teacher that is going to equal the success of the teacher that you just lost. Retaining, developing our most successful teachers is critical to that success. Do not get me wrong, y'all. There are structural policy influences, teacher pay, long-standing history of who is developed as a teacher and how we develop as a teacher that we have to tackle in this country and with the different people that we have in this room in the different positions. Crazy thing about this data is 70% of what the teachers reported as why they were leaving is directly in control of the school and the district. Because when we ask teachers today, right, because we collect this data, 100,000 samples, right, across the country every single year. The top 3, y'all, academic opportunity in the school, school leadership, and learning environment. That is why teachers are leaving, directly within our control. When we ask, and this is the most up-to-date data, but it's not so different than a decade ago, why are you leaving? If we employed these are the top retention strategies, and we can dive into there. Positive feedback is one of them, but I want you to look at the last one, y'all. Employing any one of these retention strategies increases the likelihood, increases teacher retention at that school by 15 percentage points. That means if we just pay attention and we ask our best teachers, are you thinking about staying? What can I do to help you stay? How can I make your experience better? They're more likely to stay. There are structural factors that are immediately challenging, and there is a lot in our control. I want to challenge this thought too, because I know I'm flying through decades of research here, but this is our latest report called The Opportunity Makers. And the argument that I hope to make today is that schools that are designed for instructional excellence, schools that are designed for a great student learning experience, are also designed for teacher development and retention. We looked at schools across the country. Oops. That's all right, guys. I don't need the slide because I can tell you. We looked at schools across the country, particularly schools, huge. We looked at to 50,000 schools in this data set, and we cut it to say, where are the schools with grade level? Sad news is less than 5% of schools in that data set have a history of growing student learning enough to get those students caught up. Which means if you were a student in the United States of America and you fall behind for any reason, You're essentially playing the lottery to go to a school that has a track record of accelerating your learning. We went to these schools, 7 of them. Found is actually on your notes, so thank you for the little assistance. What we found is simple, replicable. What these schools do is they produce a culture of belonging, which means students are primed to learn, feel a sense of belonging and a sense of community in their school, which activates their ability to learn. Interesting, what we also found is that also applies to their teachers. Belonging in up 10 reasons why teachers are staying. And when we dig into belonging, the crux of belonging is not just your relationship with your manager, but connection to the school mission and the school community. Produce consistent and coherent instructional programs. One of the real challenges that our educators experience, and we're going to talk about burnout, is how many of you guys have used the analogy like, we're building the plane while we're flying it, or have heard it in a meeting, everybody thinks it's great. Imagine being a teacher. We hire our teachers to be the best pilots, right? To work with students every day to be the best pilots. And then we throw them in those classrooms and we expect them to build the airplane, track the chart, be the flight attendants. Then we change course. We change the type of airplane they're doing. We change the flight pattern. We change everything. Okay? Consistency in curriculum and program matters for our kids, but it also matters for our teachers. Their ability to know what is coming, to accelerate it, to use the work, to develop it. In these schools that we studied, teachers use, for example, the adopted curriculum from the district. They're twice or 3 times as likely to use that curriculum. Meaning when they show up to collaborate with teachers, they have something to talk about. When they come back the next year, the professional development looks like it did the best year and is building on what they learned in prior years. There are things that we can do to create consistency. And lastly, students learn best when there is coherence. Meaning what they learn, the programs that they learn, predictable and unified. Say that again. Consistent, logical, predictable, and unified. All too often, our kids are these recipients of random instructional experiences. A program here, a program there, an intervention here, an intervention there. Our teachers are the recipients of random policy, coaching, leadership experiences. To give our teachers a better chance of being great, to keep them from that burnout track, to encourage them to develop and stay and build their capacity in the system, we have to create from a district level, programs that are logical, predictable. Please hope we continue this conversation. I know we only had a short amount of time, but in those reports, we have a deep dive into the retention strategies that are still working today. We have playbooks for how to create those belonging-based, consistent, and coherent experience for our educators. So remember, like, whatever position you are in, right? I hope you get out of the truck tomorrow. I hope you're thinking of those teachers that are getting out of their own cars and trying to create those simplified, aligned pathways. Designing experience for our kids, because when experiences work for our kids, they work for our teachers. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Somebody get a clip. You got the clicker? Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Michael. That was really, I think, sobering and important information for us. And I'm excited for us to bring a real panel of experts across the education, make this real for us in the lived experience. And so I want to introduce you to the folks who will be joining us. As I call your name and read your bio, please come up on stage. Nicole Stone is the Chief People Officer. Nicole Curtis Stone is the Chief People Officer of Purpose Built Schools Atlanta. Come on up, Nicole. She oversees the strategic vision and community impact initiatives to advance Purpose Built Schools' mission to cultivate their students' skills and agency in pursuit of their unlimited potential. Welcome. Also with us is Leslie Hazel Bussey, the CEO and Executive Director of the Georgia Leadership Institute for School Improvement, a nonprofit driven by a mission to uplift school leaders, transform mindsets in action, create vibrant cultures of innovation, and build excellent and equitable schools. Welcome. And last but not least is Alicia Albritton, the Chief Human Resources Officer of Clayton County Public Schools. Alicia began her professional journey with Clayton County in 2003 and has served as a middle school math teacher, instructional coach, instructional implementation specialist, assistant principal, and now as a human resources professional. Way to go, Alicia. All right, we are excited to jump in. Just to start us off, I want to hear from you, who was your trajectory shaping teacher, and what 3 words would you use to describe that teacher? Take a second.
He was my AP English teacher, and I thought I was a pretty subpar student, and he just made me believe that I was excellent. Excellent, high bar, motivator.
Mrs. Ryan was my first grade teacher, and I would say magical, sparkly, and joyful. She made learning and coming to school a place that I wanted to run into.
And I'll lift Martha Stevens. Though Ms. Stevens wasn't ever my classroom teacher, she was my Sunday school teacher, my cheerleading coach, and my Girl Scouts troop leader. And the words to describe her would be impactful, a servant leader, and she always sacrificed on our behalf.
Great. So Michael and Rebecca made a really clear case. Really drives student learning more than any other factor in a school. You all are working on this in a variety of different ways in your roles. How do you define educator experience, and what is your vision for that at its best? And what are you working on to make that true? We can start, July.
Yeah. So we have a motto that kind of was born out of a book that our leadership team read, Unreasonable Hospitality, which is about the restaurant industry, but it is an excellent book about how do we center the salt shaker? How are we truly excellent in our work? And so we believe that when we, as Chief People Officer, as executive leadership team, when we take care of our people, they will take care of our students. And so that is my primary goal and our approach to staff experience.
I'll build on that, Nicole. One of the things that we say a lot is a quote from an educator named Todd Whitaker. He says, when the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold. And the idea being that whatever adults do, right, and in particular, the way adults learn and experience learning becomes the pattern that they replicate for young people in the classroom. So we think a lot about what is the experience we most want students to have when they walk into a classroom. And then we ask, is there any reason that the adults who are responsible for creating that experience could possibly know how to, given what their experiences as learners have been? So we think a lot about how do we construct and design experiences that are joyful, rigorous, challenging, that invite leaders into spaces of discomfort, which is where learning takes place. And I think to the second part of your question about what are we doing that maybe gives me some hope is a program that we call RETAIN, which stands for Restoring Teacher Aspiration and Innovation. And it is very much an upriver strategy. So it's hard because we often look at what's going on with student achievement, but when you're talking about what we want to do is change the culture of a school, that's not overnight work and it's not proximal to student achievement. So what we are working on with RETAIN is, and I should say thank you very much, Rebecca, for the partnership with Learn for Life. Thank you very much to the Fitzgerald Foundation, to the Whitehead Foundation, to the Zeiss Foundation. I don't know if Annie's here from the Sartain-Lanier Foundation, but there's been a lot of people who are interested in cultivating leader social emotional competency as the side piece to technical leadership work, and that combination, that is a missing piece that often is not part of adult learning experiences, but does have significant impacts we're finding on school culture and the teacher experience.
And in Clayton, to make sure that we are being responsive to providing a positive educator experience, we've started just being really true and honest about our story. where we really are, our current realities. And then so in order to move our needle forward, we've really been engaging in a mindset shift. Long gone are the days where recruitment and retention rest only with one team, and we're really advancing the work across the district. We're doing things that really speak to the entire educator. How many of us have heard about the importance of educating the whole child, right? So akin to that is the need to speak to the entire educator. So we're doing things that really speak to the concerns, the true needs of teachers. We've realized that though we are competitive, for example, when it comes to salary, our current reality is we can't be number one across the teacher salary schedule, not at every step. So what do we do to speak to teachers so that they want to remain? And we've heard new hires say housing is not affordable. So this summer we launched a partnership with Clayton State where they have excess capacity on campus, and we are partnering with them to offer about teacher burnout and what takes up teachers' time. And part of that is planning. We want them to plan and execute powerful lessons. And so what our teaching and learning team has done is develop lesson plans. And so those lesson plans serve as a foundation. And so instead of a teacher having to allocate hours building that foundational plan, rather they're able to reallocate that time, for example, to making sure that all student needs are met for acceleration and remediation. So again, we're really just being clear about our reality and how do we speak to those concerns of teachers that we really can influence.
Great. You kind of are getting to my next question. I would love to hear, Nicole and Alicia, you are in the weeds right now at the start of the school year, so extra gratitude to you for being here. And the challenges are great. What are some of the biggest challenges that you currently are facing in retaining your best teachers? And again, I want to focus our conversation here on not retaining every teacher, but retaining the best teachers in your building.
I love this conversation, and a little bit about my background. So, and this will tie into my answer to this question, but was a teacher, have worked in district, charter, ed nonprofits, then went to work for Amazon, worked for startup tech. So was able to, I think, understand from multiple different perspectives what it looks like to retain talent, right? And how we think about that. And so something that we do, and I was about to jump in and piggyback off something you said around really listening to teachers. And so something that we do is a lot of surveying. And so we spend a lot of time truly listening to teachers. And so I'll talk about that, I think, in a little bit more detail. But one of the things that we did last year is we started doing POSSIP surveys. I don't know if folks have heard of POSSIP, but they're monthly pulse checks where teachers get a text message and it takes them 30 seconds to a minute to respond. And it's the same couple questions, and then we have a bonus question. So if there's things that we have concerns around, we get a chance to in real time really survey teachers. And our first, I think it was October, maybe September or October, so very early into last year, I saw this fascinating thing in our data at our elementary school. Teachers loved the elementary school. They loved the culture. They loved it. Like, it was off the charts. And they were completely burnt out. And I sat down with the principal and I was like, all right, this data doesn't make sense to me, right? We got to dig in. There's something curious in all of this. So it sparked a long and transparent conversation that he and I had, that our larger academic team had, and we realized that this was a structure problem, right? So we spent a very long time figuring out what the solution was to that, but we restructured our entire academic team. And so we had a lot of leadership at the what we'd call our cluster level, our district level, and teachers were hearing things from way too many people. And so the teacher's like, okay, so I've got 3 different assignments with all good intentions, but that was the root that we discovered through a very simple 30-minute or 30-second pulse check. And so we were able to, cut some of those cluster district positions, hire a new senior DCI, and then hire more instructional coaches to get the support down to the kids. And then we are implementing it this year. So we're really excited about the results there. But just sorry, that was a long example, but one that was really fun.
And Alicia?
Sure. So to work toward retaining our top talent, we've done a couple of things. We've built in some additional structures to give teachers voice. We really need to hear from them from the front line and then be able to react to what they're saying. We've built in extra opportunities for recognition. Although none of us do what we do, hopefully, for the pats on the back, but who doesn't want recognition for the good work that they're doing? So we built in additional opportunities for recognition. I also want to lift that we're doing intentional work around our career ladder. So we want our very best teachers to have a reason to remain in the building. Not all of them desire to ascend to leadership roles outside of the school. So we've been beginning conversation about how do we publicly communicate all of the opportunities for teachers to grow without having to leave their schools. And then we've asked our schools to also build in opportunities for teachers to showcase their skills, their leadership skills, for example. And it doesn't have to be in a formal capacity, such as grade level chair or content area chair, but giving them opportunities to lead initiatives, for example, so that they have an opportunity for leadership development as well.
Great, thanks for that. I want to go back to you, Leslie. You shared a little bit when the principal sneezes, everybody gets sick. I think that all resonates for us. Talk to me a little bit about what role you think that school leadership and district leadership has in shaping teacher retention and morale.
Well, I think we could just go back to several of Michael's slides to really kind of double click into that. But what you probably saw, certainly I saw, was how powerful an influence leaders are on the experience of school for educators. And so when you walk into a school, and this idea of belonging that is in that TNTP report, I think is so powerful. And we often, I think, in schools will reduce either educators or students into a package of skills. Right? Does this person, are they strong in math or are they strong in ELA? Do they have, and so that's the entirety of the person as they experience school. They are either good at those things or they're not, and then we track them accordingly. Even in this conversation, we're talking about who are educators that are sort of the strongest educators and who aren't. It's a reflexive thing that we do when we think about humans. But when we think about those spaces where people really are seen and seen for the human being that they are. One of the things that has really emerged out of the retain work that have been a couple of surprise things is just how powerful identity is for adults, but also, again, for students. So every single thing, and Michael said this, I'm just gonna double click again, that whatever environment is a place where human learning thrives and humans thrive and flourish is one where is good for students, and student learning is good for educators and the perpetual learning that they have to do. So those factors, I think just a human factor, that number one practice in Michael's slide about clear positive feedback. The things that we saw or are seeing in Retain, it's not just, hey, Michael, I saw how you did a great job with conducting that research, and great job, researcher, Michael. It's much more, hey, I see you as a human being, Keith, and so let me tell you, let's talk about the human aspect about what you're bringing into this space and how you're showing up, and seeing you in that way before I then have the credibility, have the grace, and have the open space on the recipient side to actually receive some feedback about whatever my technical performance is. So we see those things. The other surprise finding that emerged was that while we've talked a lot about teacher working conditions, the condition within which teacher working conditions exists are principal working conditions. And the school district and school district leaders create an environment for principals, which then cascades down in the same way that the principal sneezing also does. So the virus is all the way up and down. And I think it even extends, and I'm glad we've got some school board members here, it extends all the way up into not just the board, but I think our broader community. So to the degree that how we see one another, how we engage with one another in our public discourse does ultimately kind of trickle all the way down into how do teachers get the cues for how they engage with students. Those are things that I think have emerged from our Retain kind of work that have been surprises because we kind of thought when we went into it that teacher working conditions is a nice finite box that exists inside the school and nothing else impacts it. But very much the experience that principals have, for example, if a school administrator, if their principal supervisor is really focused on their retention number, and that's the number one thing that's being talked about when they get a visit from their principal supervisor, then that might impair, for example, some conversations about teachers that they might like to move out. But then you have a little bugaboo, because I might want to move a teacher out, but then that's going to look different for my retention data. So there's just some different places where that principal working condition ultimately gets translated into teacher and student working conditions.
That leads right to my next question. Did anybody note the one group of people more stressed than teachers? Principals. And I'm looking here at leaders in this room who are nodding and saying, yes, yes, yes. And we get, if the leader sneezes, the school gets sick, but what can we do to keep the leader healthy and reduce that stress so that they are able to create a space that teachers can really flourish? And I think Alicia, Nicole, and Leslie just opened it up to all of you all. What can happen there to help them build healthy cultures as healthy individuals?
To extend on Leslie's comments around principal conditions, we are consistently doing something as basic as making sure that across the district divisions are talking. Because ultimately what that does is make sure that work isn't repetitive, that there isn't duplicity, that there aren't multiple asks on the same day. Our teaching and learning team has done a phenomenal job of bringing, and I'll just highlight a couple of the operational divisions together. So monthly teaching and learning meets with human resources and business services, and we talk about those top level asks and portions of the year, making sure that we're not all adding to the stress of the leader at the same time, and what can we do to ultimately support them so that their deliverables don't encompass so much of their time, because ultimately that just takes away from core business where we need them really focusing on teaching and learning.
This may be perhaps a little cliche, but it is, if you know me, how I live my life and how I operate. And we brought this to PBSA, which is truly caring about the person. And that is so small, and it is so easy to do, and oftentimes we miss that. We just had an executive leadership team meeting today. We were just looking at survey data from POSSEP, right, because we all look at it constantly. And we had a teacher who our AC went out this past summer. So they got to school and there was mold in their room. We knew about this, right? And operations obviously was on top of it. We had a plan. But who do you think is going to communicate with that teacher after those results? Not their principal, the chief operating officer is going to send that person an email and say, hey, here's the plan, we're on top of it, right? And it matters to that person, right? And it says something. It says something about how we center the salt shaker, that excellence and attention to detail is very important. And so when we think about principals, it's the same thing. I know what all my principals, their favorite drink is, their favorite snack, their Starbucks order. And I know, again, that's easy, right? But you come in and you're like, okay, I know Jovan Miles likes a Topo Chico, right? And so you know these things and you take care of them. I also know when I sit down in our scheduled monthly principal HR meeting, which is a principal's favorite thing, right? To sit down and meet with the HR head, joking. And I see, right? They love us, don't they? And I see that my cool, calm, composed principal is spinning because of something that happens at his school. And I say, you go, I'll work on this stuff, and we'll meet when you're ready, right? And so I think it's not all-encompassing a solution to it, but my push is get to know your people inside and out the way that you love your children, love your leaders in the building, because they are the most important thing, the leaders and the teachers. And so, again, it's not a system or an SOP we've created, but it's a mindset and a way of life. It's also one of our core values, wholeness, how we treat people.
I would only add two things that we learned from Retain. One is we had to do a mid-course correction because, again, we thought that it was all about just making teacher working conditions accessible, and all we had to do was take the sort of neutral vehicle of the principal, who was totally whole, and equip them with some social emotional competencies, and bada bing, bada boom, we'd be at beautiful culture. Turns out that wasn't the case. They were not at neutral. They were very much suffering, and so we did a major course correct and walked them through several protocols around secondary traumatic stress, really helping them give them some language for what that is, normalize it in a way that says it doesn't make you crazy, it doesn't make you weak, but these are real experiences that you're having, and there are specific strategies that we can help give you to address those things. Now, the second piece then is, what are those strategies? And culturally, especially among principals are, right, if any of y'all who are in the room, you're rock stars. You get done. Everything gets done, and that is often to the detriment of anything that is done for you. And I think that people build their identities around that if I need something, something is wrong. If I don't show up, or that I can't delegate, otherwise it makes me look like I'm weak, or I'm not the kind of leader that I would aspire to be. And so really helping reframe, helping them really embrace this idea that if you've got top performer deal is your goal as a principal, that those practices, they're not sort of side practices. It is just like any other vision casting, any other kinds of school management practices that elite leaders do to ensure that their leader practice is always generative, that when they're engaged in some kind of conflict or students, that they have access to the most optimized parts of their brains for decision-making and generative ideation. So those were two pieces that we've seen.
Can I add one more thing
Sure.
there? So one of the things that is big for me is creating a system that saves time, efficiency. And so what we tried to do on our team was really find the places where we could save principals time, right? So I'm thinking down to the granular detail. I don't want them to spend 5 minutes looking for where the perfect template is, right? Like, let's not waste their time. So I thought about, from the HR level and from the people side of things, what can I do to create something that is so easy find and access? And so we created basically a hub for each, to you name it, every single resource they need from an tracker, so they can see when a teacher's coming back from leave, and they only have to bookmark one website. And so it's little ways that I think we can ask ourselves, like, what should not be on their plate? And there's a lot that shouldn't be on their plate, and how can we create those systems to make their life easier?
Great. I'm going to provide a little context for the crowd before we jump into the next question about Redefine Ed. So one of the most exciting parts of our work is that our job is to really understand the health, identify and co-create solutions for the challenges that we're experiencing, and invest in those solutions to help our schools. And one of the big areas that we've identified with our school leaders and district leaders is that as we were looking at the health of our schools, we have decent indicators on academic success for students, but a big gap that we saw was around instructional culture. You can look at the culture score on, no offense on Godot, but it really tells you very little about a school and is often misleading. And with that, we said, okay, we want to equip our schools and our districts with tools to better understand the educator experience and the health talent pipeline. And so over the course of the last 2 years, we've invested in the TNTP Insight Survey that Michael spoke to help equip our schools and our districts with that data, to have more data-driven leadership around making sure that their very best teachers, but their very best teachers are staying in. Raise your hand if you are a school that we have supported with TNTP Insights across the room. So we see a number of those schools in our portfolio. I want to hear from Nicole, and we have Clayton County. The whole district is gearing up to give it in Clayton County this fall, so we're excited for that. Nicole, you gave it this spring at Purpose Built. Insights, sir.
Oh, very excited. I love the Insight Survey and all things TNTP puts out. So I think I'll back up for a second before I get to that specific answer. At first, I needed my teachers to take it, and I needed them to give me honest feedback. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out how we were going to make sure safe and they felt that they could trust us. I've only been here, at that time, a year, right? And so we did a lot of work on the back end to try to create that. We got some good feedback. So then that was the fun part. And then, so tell me the question one more time again, Emily, and then I'm getting to it.
You got all this data. What did you do with it, and what stories and insights did it give you?
So we really believe in transparency around stuff like this. And so to me, if you're asking me to take a survey and I don't see you responding to my feedback, am I going to keep taking it? Probably not. So we let them peek under the hood. So we had Values Day before our pre-planning. And hey, here's the stuff you said. Here's what we've already done. And here's what we're planning on doing. We wanted them to understand the actual loop that data goes. Then we create a dashboard. We share it with folks. We give talking points to principals, right? So we let them know exactly what that process looked like. So it's not just, oh, what do they do with that? So I think for us, the big thing that we saw, and I don't know the solution yet, but we're very curious about it, is the academic expectations was one of our lowest buckets. And I have a very, very strong belief that the adults in the building and their belief about what is possible for children dictate those outcomes. And so as a leadership team, as a school team, we are trying to figure out what to do with that, right? Because there's that one question that we love so much. Can you say that question?
Sure. This is the question that keeps me up all night, every night, thinking a wide variance across the schools that have taken it. That a teacher answers, I believe my children will be able to adhere. And we see in some schools as few as 5% of teachers saying, I believe my children can achieve what they need to know at the end of this grade year, by the end of the year. And if that doesn't make you have chills and heart palpitations, I think when we're thinking about making sure that we have the best teachers, it starts with the mindset. No matter what challenges are in front of you, it starts with that mindset. I could talk about that all day. I'm not the panel, but back to Nicole. What'd you do with that?
Thank you. So we sat with that, and we first, because it's not like you can do a follow-up question and say, so which one of you have low expectations, right? And we want to believe the best about our teachers, right? And we want to, believe that they're there. And we also need to say, what can we do as an organization to raise the bar across our district, to make it amazing for folks with that high bar, and to make it a little uncomfortable for the folks that, maybe don't. We also are looking at, a ninth grade teacher who could have kids reading at a third grade level. So when they look at that question, are they answering it in a way that's very exacting, right? And so lean in and dig in and just get some more information there. So it's a conversation that we're trying to figure out, what we do with that. I think the gist of it is, we as an organization, excellence, and so that's one of our core values. We have new core values this year, and it's not just on a poster board, right? It's we need to know what that looks like in that ninth grade classroom. For that teacher that has student reading level, what does excellent instruction look like in that classroom? And we need to have a clear instructional vision for that. So our academic team is amazing and working to really parse that out. So we don't have the answer yet, but we're really curious to figure out how we can push the mindset and also support our teachers. That was our first question we asked in our POSIP survey is were you prepared? How can we better support you in your first month?
Over the next 5 years, this is for everyone, what's the single most important shift given your position? Over the next 5 years, this is for everyone, what's the single most important shift given your position?
over the next 5 years, in order to begin seeing a transformation with the educator experience, the teaching profession has to be restored to one that's appreciated, one that's coveted, one that's respected. We talked about efficacy, we talk about burnout, we talk about retention. But if I ask each of you, what's your response if someone says, someone in your life, someone that you love says, I want to be a teacher? Are you going to encourage, right? Or are you going to say, are you sure about that, right? So that's one way that we have to transform, is just get it back to, get the profession back to a status that's coveted, that's respected. And see each of us in that space. Negative news story, right? And a teacher in an altercation, a fight in the hallway, right? It ran on the news several days, several times a day, right? So that really doesn't help propel our profession, not at all. So just getting back to a place where we all see ourselves in the work and figuring out how we can individually impact it.
Told that I should say we need to do leadership development at scale, which would be a really good thing for an organization called the Georgia Leadership Institute for School Improvement to say. And so, leadership development at scale. And let me just drill down one more second before I say the thing that I want to say, which is that there are 180 school districts in Georgia, and 55% of those school districts have a brand new chief executive, superintendent. 55%. Did I say 50%? It's 55. In the last 18 months. So anybody from any organization knows what happens when you've got that turnover at the top. At the bare minimum, who are these superintendents? The assistant superintendents typically anymore. Some of these rurals are principals. And so then now you've got an AP, an assistant principal, who's stepping into the principal vacancy, or you have a principal step into, you get it, right? And so that's going all the way down the line. At the same time, we've got this exodus of teachers. So we have people who are stepping into these leadership roles with significantly less experience. Just many, many, many years less experience in school, and to be honest with you, just less. They're young, and we're asking complex human leadership work that there is. So we definitely need leadership development at scale. We need that at the same time as we're seeing significant threats to federal funding, specifically the component of that is earmarked for training, for teacher training and leadership development. So leadership development at scale. But here's the other thing. The young people who are coming through right now, so let's just pretend that everybody did respect the teaching profession. Let's just imagine that. Young people are going through a long recruitment process. It's Monday through Friday, 8 to 2, 3, from August to May for 13 years at a bare minimum. And we think that we can say, you know what, we'll give you a $2,500 signing bonus to forget of your life that has been the reality of what learning and being in a school experience is. So for me, the thing I would love for us to see us attend to that's the most essential, important, which was also in Michael's report, as it turns out, is really shifting what happens inside school. What does learning look like? Are students engaged in vibrant, career-connected learning that helps humans, that taps into who they are and relevant to them because it should be relevant to them, but they see it. They see walking in their shoes today to what it is that they're learning. So that would be my actual
I'm glad you went off
answer.
script. Great. Nicole?
Out there will know the arena, y'all. Like, don't listen to the people who aren't in the arena. Is where the hard stuff is, right? Like that's the class. And listen to the people in the arena enough in education. And we make a lot of decisions with high titles And we aren't truly listening to what teachers are telling us. They will tell us exactly better for them. And I don't believe that it's all of a sudden we have, people who don't want to be teachers because there's less people being born that care about this. We have to create the conditions in school, the feedback that they're giving us. And that's why I'm so big on surveys, and I'm so big on truly looking at this and saying, what can we do? Again, things work, and they work too many hours. And can we fix that? No. We have an extended school day, and teachers, have long days, right? And we can't change those work hours for the most part, right? But one of the things we did is we're like, you know what? What's going to save you 10 minutes at night? Not packing your lunch. So we did free lunch for all of our staff across our schools where they can eat in our cafeteria. It's actually really delicious food. And so it's the little things, right? And the way that we listen. And so I think that is the problem, is we do not listen enough and respond to what the people in the arena, the teachers, are saying they need.
Awesome. We've got an amazing crowd here with tonight that is civic leadership, district leadership, philanthropic leadership. All the leaders are here tonight, and my question to you is, what do you need from them to help support your work over the next 5 years of making this a reality? Don't be shy.
We all want to say it, right? We're like, who's going to be the first person to say it? We want resources. But, yeah, I mean, of course, right? Like, Purpose-Built Schools Atlanta has so many partners and so many amazing folks that support our work that we're able to truly, have that wraparound services community in South Atlanta. So we are very well supported and funded in that way. I think that my push is get in the arena. Go see the work, questions, do the listening tour, right? When I first started, I went around to every school, many people, and said, what ails you? How can we help? What can I do? Is there anything else that you need from me? And I would just encourage the folks in the room to stay in the arena and don't distance yourself from what's actually happening on the ground. And I'll stop there.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed and appreciated about, in particular, the funder community here in Atlanta is how thoughtful they've been as partners. And I would encourage continued thoughtfulness such that the investment, of course, everyone's going to say investment. So I think the target of that investment is critical. Thinking of, culturally, we really hone in on kind of a disease model, right? And so I think it's sort of an inclination of funders and maybe all of us to say, what's broken? Let's fix that thing. And so we start by saying, we ask the teacher, hey, who just left? Hey, why'd you leave? And they tell us the 5 things. And then we start trying to fix those 5 things. But between the moment that young person said, you know what? I do want to get into this profession. There is a fire in me. There is a thing that drives me to make a difference in young people's lives, and that's why I want to get into this profession. That's what brought them in the first, continue just things that pushed them out the door. Think, how do we amplify and keep for those things that draw them into the profession? A lot of those things are in Michael's report, but thinking about how we can help teachers see their impact. Right? Continuously putting in front of them and remembering that what brought them into the profession is they want to make a difference. Yeah, we got to provide them with housing because there's some basic things. Yeah, we got to listen to them so that they feel heard. But the things that really drew them into how did they make a difference? And the more we have a funder community that continue, that's not always funding that you can give here in September and then get a report in May and show the big change, that it's patient upstream investing, the better.
And I'd say investment in advocacy. And investment, we've talked about housing. We talked about the need to retain our top talent. And so the way to do that is to engage in development. So yeah, local professional development, but teachers want to be mobile as well. And inherent with that is the need for additional credentials. So supporting them as they earn certification, supporting them as they earn advanced degrees, just supporting that work. And then in advocacy. So just, I'll just think about House Bill 385. So House Bill 385 is the bill that allows teachers to come back full-time. They continue to draw their benefit from TRS, and then they are placed on the teacher salary schedule, and they earn their check for the work they're doing currently. It's very restrictive. So advocating on more liberalness with that, so it becomes a true part of our pipeline. So if we're saying retirees possess the capacity to really impact change in our schools, then we have to make it so that they can get there. Right now, they have to have 30 years of service. Oftentimes, they may retire with 29 years of service. Well, that excludes them. They have to be out of service for 1 year. Is there some liberalness that can accompany that? Each RISA is afforded 3 high needs critical areas where the retirees can return. So this year for the Metro RISA, those areas are elementary education, special education, and language arts. Well, what if our district doesn't have critical needs in those areas? Then House Bill 385 doesn't benefit us. So just being an advocate for those policies that will really impact change.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. I think we've got some questions coming from the audience. Shared as I gather our cards. Okay. We are no notes on these, so get ready. How do we ensure professional development is personalized, relevant, and tied to classroom realities, including data? Feel free to jump in.
Is our chief schools officer still here? I'm kidding. I think she just left. I will take a stab at this, though I am not an academic lead here. But it comes back to really reading those survey results and listening. And so we got a lot from our TNTP Insight surveys around what actually helps them move the needle. And so we restructured our PLCs to listen to their voices there. And so I think it's about, again, listening to those things and thinking about like how we can make those, real-time changes based on that.
I'll double click on the surveys and share that as part of the retain experience, we went and sort of did really deep dive style surveys called empathy interviews. So instead of a whole survey, we actually had principals and APs sit down and we trained them in the protocol of empathy interviewing, less about how do I squeeze what information you might have out of you, but much more how can I better understand what life here in this school feels like for you. What does it feel like? How can I, as much as possible, leave behind my experience, leave behind my values, and inhabit your perspective so that I can understand? And I think starting with that level of depth at the individual level is a really important starting point for personalized learning experiences for teachers.
Great. I've got another question that is going to have a lot of responses. So what organizational redesign can be considered to support coherence, school-level coherence, specifically in districts with high superintendent and senior-level turnover? So I love Michael, Rebecca, and Leslie, if y'all could lean in on that question. That 55%, yikes, that is a hard number to deal with superintendent tenure.
I mean, we could spend an hour talking about this question. So quick pitch. The end of the opportunity makers, we have 4 recommendations. And I think a lot of these recommendations are kind of honed in on here. And so I'll go through those, but with some added color. Number 1, you have to anchor on the actual student experience. Like you also talked about it, right? All too often we have these great ideas. Ask your teachers, follow the kids, ask the kids, anchor in on what they are experiencing from one class to the other, and that should guide the progress and the priorities that you're making. Number 2, they say it silently, Shaniqua knows. You gotta, sometimes the best thing to do for everyone is to get rid of the stuff that is in the way. All too often our inclination is to add to add a program, Sometimes we have to say, we've used, thank you, program that we've used, you're no longer needed because we have other things, let's get rid of it. What I recommend for a lot of superintendents or CAOs is to evaluate your system and the ecosystem based on what the kids are experiencing, based on what the teacher is experiencing to drive that. Look at all of those inputs and establish what is my actual instructional focus. And then don't be scared to get rid of the stuff that is in the way. You can't articulate, you can't lead change management if you are attempting to change 17 programs in the facility. So another way to think about this, right, is like, I want the straightest line to instruction. Does this tool and resource that my teachers are using, does it have a direct line to instruction? If it does, let's invest in that. Said quite a different way that a lot, when we talk to new superintendents and CEOs, what I say is, what is the one or two things that you can focus on so that 15 other things happen that you don't have to pay attention to? And so often it's about getting that instructional focus down to those one or two things and trusting that it's going to have an impact that you don't necessarily have to spend every minute of every day following, but instead getting rid of those programs and focusing just on those couple of things that'll move the needle. People are really brilliant. Kids are really brilliant. If we give them the resources and the tools and we point a straight line to their brilliance, they will achieve it. We get in the way too much.
I'll add on to that so that's within school systems, right? How can the nonprofit partners and funders in the room support keeping the main thing, right? So I would suggest for all of the supportive partners, asking your school district leaders, what are your 1, 2, 3 at absolute most top priorities, and how can we support those? Because what we oftentimes see in the nonprofit and funder community is like, I have a favorite issue, I have a favorite thing, I have a program, I have a thing, I can come in and provide that. Instead of that, ask what are your priorities and how do we align and support as a village?
That's great. Thank you all for that. I have one last question. I'm getting the cue that our time is almost up, so I want to get this. A great question is, there are no colleges or universities on this stage. They certainly have a big role in shaping our educator experience. What should colleges and universities be doing to better prepare our teachers to be in the arena?
Have the students in our schools early and often. So we know they have the cumulative experience student teaching. We know that early in program they're asked to complete observation hours and practicum, but that's still not enough. So figuring out a way to redesign the program so that they're in schools having those real in-house experiences early and often.
Round of applause for our incredible panel. Y'all going to take a seat. So much gratitude for you all. I'm going to pass it back over to Gira to close us out.
Well, thank you, Emily. And thank you to each of our panelists and our presenters. And thank you, yes. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight as well. It is not lost on me that the title of this event series is incomplete. A city changing. But how? For better or for worse? I think what we do when we leave here tonight really helps us answer that question. The panelists tonight gave us a lot of ideas of what we can do to improve teacher retention and talent development in Metro Atlanta. And we also learned why doing so is absolutely critical to our future. I hope you accept the charge to move these ideas forward and better support our educators and our school leaders in our region. You should have a card on your table. I didn't bring it up, so I apologize. You should have a card on your table with all the ways that you can stay engaged with Redefine Ed. I encourage you to follow us on social media and to sign up for our newsletters. We'll continue to try to elevate issues like this that are happening across our ecosystem that we need to collectively address. And then please join us. We're going to host a webinar on September 29th. It's going to be hosted by Emily, and we're going to continue this conversation in more depth, and we're going to discuss ways to partner on teacher development and retention in Metro Atlanta. Together, we can better support our teachers and ultimately our students. Thank you again for being here, and I really hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.